Yeah, there's
if you don't do it this year, I mean, because again, the opportunity cost is so low. You have so many free agents, they can't all be paid, and you have a ton of options in that draft too. So the people who don't want to pay free agents can use them on draft picks. If you're the Patriots, you got to do both.
Yeah, I think you got to go free agency at wide receiver. I've been saying that a long time because you need to see a guy that succeeds doing things in the NFL that you already can tell will translate into your system. I think with these college guys, the passing offenses, the coverages that they see in college are just so much different from what you see in the pros. You see so little press man in the pro. In the
problem here with the established guy, here's the biggest dilemma with the Patriots. You would always look to sign and or draft a guy that fit this offense, and in particular Brady. They make a big play for Adam Humphries, because he would have fit Brady in this offense. He's the type of guy that Brady would like to throw to. You don't know who you're tailoring that towards right now. So, I mean, I think you have to just look at talent as objectively as possible without any regard for who's going to be throwing the ball, and say, this guy is just a football player. He can beat you. He can win. He does enough things where he can do anything here. I do think, Bill and the Patriots have their type of guys, and this is going to be the big dilemma heading in is, does that work anymore? And not only has the game changed, has your team changed to the point that the type of guys that Bill looks at and says, that's a football player. I know it when I see it. Absolutely. That's the guy. Is that still the case?
I just think the biggest thing to me with the wide receivers in the draft is I am not confident at all in their ability to, one, evaluate the wide receiver position in the draft, and then two, develop that guy once he gets here. Zero hope whatsoever that they're capable of doing that based off of what we've seen. I mean, it's not just the DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, Terry McLaurin, AJ Brown conversation over N'Keal Harry. It's honestly looking at that pick and saying, how did they think N'Keal Harry was the best receiver out of that group? And Mecole Hardman, you can throw him in there too. Just how do you, as an evaluator, look at those options on the board and say, hey, we actually like N'Keal Harry more than we like AJ Brown? I just don't see how you can come away with that. So if they struggle so much with kind of projecting that position into their offense and into their system and into the NFL game, then just get a guy that's already proven that he's a great player at this level and let him be who he is. Get Corey Davis and let Corey Davis run Corey Davis type of routes, crossing routes, deep verticals, things like that. Get Allen Robinson and turn him into a contested catch guy here, because that's what he's really good at. If you can do those types of things with a pro talent that's already proven himself in this league and already has things that work for him in this league, it's a much easier transition. And then at that point, you can go into the draft. I think that I am a little bit more comfortable with them taking a tight end. I definitely think that they can take a guy like Kyle Pitts and no one's going to really have any problem with that.
Sure.
So it's just, that's to me.
That's going to kill you after blowing two picks on two third rounders a year before to go right back there and grab it. And certainly no one's going to complain over getting someone like Pitts, but that's just, is that acknowledging two misses right out of right off the bat there?
The thing with Pitts is that he, in my mind, is a potential generational type of guy. So I don't know if you're necessarily taking Pitts as saying, oh, Ossie and Keen are busts, right? Because he is just such a good player and such a good prospect that it's almost like a pick that you have to make with a team that's so limited at the receiver position right now. But I think the ultimate thing, it's not about not valuing quarterbacks. Quarterback's the most important position on the team. It's about putting that quarterback in a position to succeed. And I just don't know right now, based off of what they've shown us over the last couple of years, there's no position to succeed for a quarterback here.
Okay. So, I mean, you tiptoed around it, and this is a question a lot of people are going to ask. Relieved of GM duties is a harsh way to put it, but there's a lot of people talking about, is Bill the right guy to rebuild the team? Maybe thinking is antiquated. The league has changed. He's drafting guys that would have been effective for teams or for the game, or maybe 5-6 years ago, and that the things have moved so fast in a different direction. It looks like the Patriots are so far behind the times, just in terms of what type of personnel the best teams have at their disposal. And then you look at the Patriots and you say, we've got none of those guys. Like, certainly on offense, and not on the defensive side of the ball, but certainly on offense, that looks to be the case. Defense, Bill, was way ahead of the curve. On the cornerbacks are more important than edge rushers. Loaded up with terrific D-backs and plugged and played with enough people like your Van Noys and your Collins to create pressure, set the edge, and do whatever you needed to do there to have a dynamite defense. So that the defensive game plan, I think, still is sound in terms of what it is that they think they need to do to be successful. But offensively, I don't know that they know what type of players that they need anymore.
I think the skill talent is really where it stands out the most, is that they have failed over the last couple of years when they draft those types of players to understand how the athlete is going to translate in the NFL game. N'Keal Harry and Sony Michel looked like great athletes in the college game. N'Keal would take a screen pass and reverse it the field and go all the way out, 60 yards to the house on a throw behind the line of scrimmage. Sony Michel was running all over, Oklahoma and Alabama and all these teams in college, but then he gets to the pros and he's just a pedestrian athlete. So being able to identify which type of athletic talents are going to translate into the NFL game, I think is a really important conversation that they need to have. Now, in terms of Bill Belichick passing over GM duties to anything like that,
not happening.
Let's not get carried away. Okay. Obviously it's not.
No, you just want to see him change his thinking a tad, because he has been in the past ahead of the game on offense as well. Is valuing tight ends to create mismatches all over the field, valuing receivers who were versatile, like your Amendolas and your Edelmans and this Welker. He created that position, that didn't exist as a weapon before. That was just some guy plugged in there because he was short and out of position, and they turned it into a massive weapon that other teams had completely rebuilt defenses around to scheme. He's one of the first guys to devalue the running back, when you're just plugging Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis in there and saying, this will be fine.
Until he took one in the first round,
But again, and that actually makes you think, but that happened after people stopped valuing running backs really high. And he's thinking, 5 years ago, this player is going top 5 and I'm getting him at 20 something right now. So there is value in that. They got the wrong guy. If you did that with Chubb late in the first round versus Sony, you'd be like, bang, Bill did it. So again, even that, I like that, because when the value came down, then they pounced at it. He's never really liked chasing, these flashy high price things. The cost that it takes to draft the edge rusher, or to pay them in free agency, or the receiver. They just make way too much money to make sense in a salary cap universe for the Patriots. So he tends to avoid those. It's just
honestly, his draft strategy in a lot of ways has actually, the analytics community applauds him a lot of the time because of how he values certain positions in the draft and realizes, okay, listen, we could go out there and we could trade 2 first-round picks for Odell Beckham Jr. and pay that guy $18 million a year.
But it's not
really the best allocation of our resources. Is that really netting wins and losses by bringing any of the Browns are winning without Odell right now, right? I don't think the history of making those types of trades always works out for like Stephon Diggs and the Buffalo Bills, the way it's worked out in Buffalo so well with Diggs, or Arizona and DeAndre Hopkins. Those marriages don't always lead to actual production and actual results. So I think that we do sometimes get too caught up in fantasy football.
I like the philosophy.
That type of stuff.
He's just missed. The philosophy, I think, has been sound. If you had who's here, who in the world is having this conversation if instead of Harry it was Metcalf, instead of Sony it was Chubb? Going after that position there where they did was a smart strategic move. They just got the wrong guys.
Right.
I mean, again, and also that's where the talent evaluation comes in, this outside the box thinking. That everybody knew they needed tight ends heading into last year's draft. It wasn't a great tight end draft, so the top talents were all available when they took Asiasi in the 3rd round. But instead of taking the top 2 or 3 rated guys, which again, rated by whom? Everybody's got their different evaluations. But you take guys that had kind of questionable marks, like Asiasi might have been the consensus 8th tight end, and Keene around 9 or 10, and none were off the board. And it's not like any of them are lighting it up right now, but certainly
I
they
also
have
think
an idea what they're looking for, and it's different sometimes than what other people are looking for.
I also think the drafting the last couple of years outside of the N'Keal Harry pick has been fine. Look, you're not going to hit on every single pick. I don't know. I mean, Kyle Duggar looks like a decent player. Uche looks like a decent player. They got Micah Wenu in the 6th round. Those guys can all play. You get
Amazing.
you get 3 guys out of a draft that can all play, that can all, be starters or be a role players in your team. That's a good draft. The draft before that, they got Damian Harris, they got Chase Winovich out of that draft. It's just been too often that the skill position players that they haven't really been able to hit on that specific position, and it's kind of trickled into the fact that A, they haven't been able to hit on it in the draft, and B, Bill won't spend on it in free agency. He's not going to go out there and sign a wide receiver to $18 million.
Not for $18 million.
Right. So that's not, he's not hitting on it in the draft. He's not hitting on it in free agency because he won't pay for it. And that's where the problems that you sort of run into. We can go ahead through this list, and I see people in the comments. You want me to go through every single team's draft record? I can find a deep document Williams for you. I'm telling, this draft is an inexact science, guys. It's not an easy thing to do. I rate all these guys. I am wrong all the time. I thought that certain guys were going to be great players that are not great players. That's just what happens. And I'm not Bill Belichick, and I'm not Nick Caserio. I'm just a guy with a laptop that that knows what he's watching, right? So ultimately, it's not an easy process.
You're much more than that, Evan.
You can go through every single team's draft and figure out, okay, this guy was a bust. That guy was a bust. The Seahawks drafted Rashad Penny in the 1st round a few years ago, running back, who's a complete bust. He doesn't play for them.
Knee injuries too, but
yeah. But
right. But he got passed by Carson, who was not, a blue chipper, like Penny.
Right. And that's the thing, is that we can go through this all the time, right? But ultimately, they did come away the last couple of drafts with 3, maybe 4 guys that they can hang their hat on in those drafts. And I don't see what is wrong about any of that, to be honest. And we have to ultimately think about the draft differently here, because I think that every single time they pick a guy in the first 2 rounds, he's expected to be an all-pro. And that's just not how it works. In
today's NFL, you expect them to be contributors right away. And if they're not, it happens. But, that's what it is.
Right. So ultimately, we're going to talk about this all off season. Who should they pick? And, what's the wrong with their draft? I think their draft strategy over the last couple of years has been totally fine, outside of course, the N'Keal Harry pick over the guys that they had in that spot. But other than that, I don't really think it's been a terrible recent draft record for Bill Belichick. And we should really, allow him to, make some more opportunities here to pick some more guys. But with the quarterback position, I know you're going to get a ton of questions on that. I think that you need to really think about a conversation of, do you want to take your chances on a high upside, type of player versus a guy that is maybe a little bit more polished, So I think Kyle Trask last night played a fantastic game for Florida. He was really solid in that game, consistent, poised, made a lot of really great throws, but there is a conversation to be had there about, kind of, is he have the middling arm talent, not really an athlete? What's his ceiling as a player versus a guy like a Trey Lance, who's going to be rated extremely high, but is going to have issues with, sort of not a finished product, like a Josh Allen or like somebody like Jordan Love or someone in that kind of conversation. So where do you go for there? Do you go with high upside? Do you go with low floor? That's in the 1st round. Typically, I would say, you don't go with the low floor player. In the 1st round, you go big, right? If you're going to talk about more of like a 2nd round guy, then a guy like a Trask or maybe a Mac Jones or someone like that becomes more part of the conversation.